Tonight for dinner, we are having barbecue pulled pork on a nice crispy baked potato. I absolutely love doing this. We have been having pulled pork on a baked potato for at least a year now, and this is, I think, the best way to have barbecue pulled pork. It's better than on a hamburger bun. It's better than on a piece of toast. It's better than just with coleslaw on the side. Anything you would put with your barbecue pulled pork can go on this as well. We put shredded cheese. Sometimes I'll do sour cream. Sometimes I'll do coleslaw. Whatever you want to put on it, and it always works out so great. One nice thing about this is I bought almost a 10-pound pork roast from Sam's Club for 20 bucks. And I've cooked the entire thing the same way, but I only put sauce on a little bit that we're going to eat tonight. This is at least 4 more dinners for the two of us for only 20 bucks worth of meat. And potatoes are cheap, and everybody's got barbecue sauce in their fridge. So this is such a cheap and easy meal. Takes a little while to cook, so we tend to only do it on the weekends, but it's just absolutely great. You could also throw this in the slow cooker, start it in the morning, and then have dinner waiting for you when you get home. The first thing we're going to do is just start prepping our meat. I got a really big pork roast. This is a 9.7 pound bone-in pork butt from Sam's Club. And I don't normally make this much, but I got a big one for a couple of reasons. One, because we really like barbecue pork in this house. We're going to have this 2 or 3 times this week. And then I'm also going to freeze a lot of it in kind of portioned out containers so that we can have some nice, easy freezer meals over the next month or two. And I just kind of want to pat this dry. And you definitely don't have to use such a giant piece of pork. The only things that I think are super important for this is that it's a really fatty piece. This is going to be cooking on the stove for quite a few hours, and the more fat you have that can render down, it just kind of gets tender really nicely, and it adds such a nice flavor. All right, this is basically dry. I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands, and we can get started on seasoning. I'm not doing anything crazy in terms of seasoning. We're going to add some broth and some barbecue sauce to the pot that it's simmering in, but I really like to get, and we're going to get a good sear, and I really like to get some flavor kind of locked into that sear. I'm going to add a generous amount of black pepper. I'm going to add some paprika, some granulated onion. That was a lot. I'm just going to spread that out over the whole thing. I'm also going to add some garlic powder. And I kind of like to just press it in. If you feel like the spices aren't going to stay when you go to flip this, sometimes I'll add a little bit of extra oil on top and just kind of pat that down too. And with this side coated, I'm going to flip it, wash my hands one more time, and then we will coat the other side as well. And we're just going to do the exact same thing on this side. A really generous amount of each of our seasonings. And I forgot to add salt to the other side. I'm going to add some to this side, and then I'll add some to the other side once it's in the pot. All right, my pork is very nicely coated. I'm going to go ahead and preheat my Dutch oven, and once that's hot, we're going to throw this in to sear for just a few minutes. All right, I'm putting a very generous coating of oil in the bottom of this Dutch oven. And then my giant piece of pork is just going to go straight in, and it's going to sear probably for about 6 or 7 minutes. So before we came over here, I did forget to add salt to the fat capsize, so I'm just going to add a little bit now. And then to make sure that sticks, I'm just going to add a tiny bit more oil and just kind of press it all into place. And then this is going to be flipped. I like to do this with 2 pairs of tongs because this is really a giant piece of meat in a pot that barely holds it. And then I'm going to let that sit for another 5 or 6 minutes to get the other side nice and seared. While my meat is finishing searing, I am going to go ahead and start prepping the broth that this is going to cook in. I really like this better than bouillon, garlic base, and the chicken base. I think we're going to be adding probably 4 to 6 cups of liquid to the Dutch oven. I don't want to fill it all the way up because a lot of the fat's going to render down. I just kind of want to get the liquid up halfway or a little over halfway on the meat. I'm going to add probably 2 teaspoons of the garlic base. And then about the same 2 teaspoons of the chicken base. And that'll get me about 4 cups of broth. And if I need to add some more later, I can add some more later. I'm going to add 2-ish teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. And then I'm just going to add some water into my 2-cup measure here and get this all mixed together. My broth is ready. My meat is just about done searing. I'm going to go ahead and get everything set up so we can add this into the Dutch oven. So I've seared it on all sides, and I'm just going to go ahead and lay it back down, and I want the fat cap to be up so that all of the fat can start to render through the meat down into the rest of it. I know it looks really big in this pot right now, but it'll shrink as it cooks. And then I've got my broth that I prepared earlier. I'm just going to go ahead and start pouring this in. And that was 2 cups of liquid. I'm going to add in probably just another cup here. And I like to just move it around, make sure that that liquid is even on all sides. I'm just going to cover it with a lid, let this come to a simmer, and it's going to simmer for probably 4 hours. I will check on it about every hour just to make sure we haven't lost too much liquid and to flip it around. This has been simmering for about 3.5 hours. I've already flipped it twice, and I'm just going to flip it one more time so we can check how tender the meat is. The fat is already coming apart really, really nicely. And this is starting to come apart. It's definitely not done. I think it's probably going to be another 2 hours, but it is starting to come apart, which is exactly what we want to happen. I'm going to let that simmer for another hour or 2, and then I will come check on it in a little while. So our meat has been cooking for just about 6 hours. And as I go to pick it up, it's kind of starting to fall apart, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. I'm going to go ahead and take everything out of the pot. I'm just going to set it in a bowl so that it can start to cool down, and then we will get started on our potatoes. My pork is done and cooling down. I'm going to go ahead and get started on my potatoes. I think that russet potatoes make the best baked potatoes, but use whatever you want. If you don't like baked potatoes, I think like roasted potatoes or even something like fries would also work really, really well for this. I'm going to go ahead and wash these, and then I will get them prepped for baking. Alright, my potatoes are washed, and The way I wash my potatoes is I just kind of run them under cold water, and I just use a nail brush. I like these because the bristles are kind of stiff, but they're not so hard that they damage the potato, and it just scrubs it and cleans it really well. So my potatoes are washed and dried. I'm going to go ahead and grab a fork and just poke a bunch of holes in them, and then we're going to put some oil and some seasoned salt. Now this part, of course, you have to be careful with. I kind of like to grab the fork like this, so just you know, an inch is sticking past my hand, and I just push the fork into it. Keep the potato on the plate when you do that. You don't want to stab your hand or anything. Alright, with my potatoes full of holes, I'm just going to add a good amount of oil on each of these, just to make sure they're coated. And then I'm also going to put seasoned salt all over the outside. Use whatever seasonings you like here. This is how I ate baked potatoes growing up, with seasoned salt, and so this is just how I like it. I think probably garlic powder would go really, really well here. A little bit of salt and pepper, really anything you like. And then last thing, I've got a couple of wet paper towels here. This is actually going to be a two-step process. I am going to microwave them for a couple minutes just to start the cooking process. And then I'm going to cook them in the air fryer the rest of the way so that we can get kind of a crispier skin on them. The wet paper towel just kind of helps steam it a little bit. All right, these are all wrapped up. They are oiled and seasoned and wrapped in a wet paper towel. I'm going to throw this in the microwave for probably, I'm going to do a minute and a half, and then flip it over and maybe do one more minute and a half. All right, these were in the microwave for about 3 minutes per side, and they are definitely a little bit softer. They are part of the way cooked. Maybe about halfway cooked, which is what I am looking for. And then from here, I'm going to throw them in my air fryer. I'm going to add just a little bit more oil to these. And then in the air fryer, I'm going to do 380 degrees. I'm going to start at 10 minutes, and I'm going to check it from there. If they hadn't been microwaved first, I would start at 20 minutes and go from there. But they're about halfway cooked now, so I think in the 10 minutes, they'll be most of the way cooked. All right, my potatoes are in the air fryer, and I am going to go ahead and start shredding my meat. It has been cooling down for a little while, but it's still pretty warm. I like to use these really thick nitrile gloves because they protect my hands from a lot of the heat, but it just makes it a little easier to deal with the mess from shredding the meat. And really what I'm doing here, I'm mostly just, of course I'm shredding it into smaller pieces, but I'm also separating out the fat. We don't eat a lot of the fat, but it's just easier to shred it out this way. Most of the fat rendered down, but I've got some bigger pieces of fat that just didn't render down all the way, and so I like to pick those out and keep them aside. My pork is all shredded. My potatoes are coming out of the air fryer now. Now, I heard kind of the rule about baked potatoes is you're not supposed to slice them open. So I'm just going to use a couple of forks, and I'm going to kind of try to rip it open a little bit. And that keeps them a little fluffier. And I'm just going to kind of squish it like this. And that is cooked so nicely on the inside. So that was in the air fryer for about 20 minutes total. And that was after being microwaved for 6 minutes total. These are pretty big. If you have smaller potatoes, then you definitely don't need to cook them for that long. But those turned out really, really nicely. All right, I'm gonna get some pork, and we're just gonna load those up with our potatoes up with pork and barbecue sauce and whatever other toppings we want. They're super fluffy because I didn't slice them.
Oh, very nice.
And then I squished them a little bit. That's how they do it in England.
In England.
Alright, so he wants shredded cheese on his, so I'm just going to put a little bit of cheese down first. And I'm going to kind of like stuff it into the potato. And then pulled pork is going to go right on top. And I don't want any cheese on mine, so I'm just going to go straight in with the pork on mine. And then we will top these with some barbecue sauce, and dinner is done. Now that everything is done, the last thing is just to smother it in barbecue sauce. My favorite barbecue sauce is this Stubbs Sweet Heat. I really, really love the sweet and spicy barbecue sauces. And this one's a little thin. I really like the thinner barbecue sauces, but of course here, use whatever your favorite barbecue sauce is. Barbecue pulled pork on a baked potato has got to be one of my favorite summer dishes. I obviously have been eating them on hamburger buns for a really long time, but I have baked potatoes and I just thought this would be absolutely perfect. Cheers. It's just absolutely incredible. I don't know why this isn't a regular thing for barbecue pulled pork. The crispy baked potato is just the absolute perfect thing to go with it.